We're looking at the game between Anish Giri and Ding Liren from round 11 of the Candidates tournament. This was a great game. Lots of action here. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Who do you think's going to win the Candidates? And do consider supporting us via PayPal or Patreon. Check out the rewards on Patreon. For example, you get access to all the opening playlists on the channel. That's a great way of learning an opening, and of course extra videos as well. Now on with this game. So Anish Giri with the white pieces, he realized this was a big chance to try and catch up with the leader Yanyipom Nishi going into this game, and he could see that Nepo was playing very solidly against Caruana. In fact, that game was drawn relatively quickly, so Caruana couldn't catch up, couldn't make up any ground on Nepo. So this was a chance for Giri just to try and catch up a little bit if he could win this game. Ding Liren not in his best form. So it's not a Berlin, it's a Spanish. And here, well, one could expect a mainline Spanish with Rook E1 or D3 is very popular. But Giri took on C6, so he's delayed. This is the so-called delayed exchange variation. And this was very, very popular in the 1970s, or relatively popular in the 1970s and 1980s. I used to play this at the start of my career, and I enjoyed playing it. I had some nice results with it. It's very positional. You'll notice that the pawn structure is very similar to positions that arise out of the Berlin, actually. So Giri is going for a strategic complexity here. You know, all the pieces are on the board apart from that exchange of bishop and knight. So it's as though he's delaying the main struggle till the middle game. You know, he's ensures there won't be so many exchanges early on, basically. Now here the old move was knight d7, and if you're interested in a fantastic strategic game, check out a blitz game between Kasparov and Svidler from 1998, where Kasparov plays a strategic masterpiece after knight d7. But anyway, that's for another time. Ding went bishop d6, and this actually does look very, very similar to lines of the Berlin. Except this pawn is on a6 and not a7, so it's a tiny difference. And as I said, it can arise from the Berlin. And here, if you want to play in quite a safe way with black, you could play rook b8 and then castle kingside. But instead, Ding decides to castle long. And that, of course, means that the game is already just really, really double-edged, because now Giri has a chance to attack on the queen side. Ding has a chance to attack possibly on the king side. So it's all great fun now. Ding playing his part in this game. Queen e2. Well, you don't have to play Queen e2, I have to say. Not absolutely necessary. One could get on with a queenside advance straight away, but Queen e2 does take the queen off the d file, so you know it can be a useful move, or a prudent move, let's say. Bishop g4, good move from Ding. This, of course, is the problem with this system from White's viewpoint, that there's no light squared bishop, so this pin is really rather annoying. One could deal with this by playing the knight back to c4 and then to e3 and drive the bishop away, and potentially if the bishop goes back to h5 you have h3 and g4. there's a famous Capablanca game that went along these lines, actually. Capablanca Janovsky. That's another strategic classic. Or one could play with a3 and b4 and try later on to advance with b5. That's also a very interesting idea. Or a3, b4, and sometimes even c4. But Giri went with c3. So he's also intending b4. Probably not d4. That leaves the centre too vulnerable. But c3, also a very viable option and quite dangerous. c5. So Ding is trying to stop that, and he has a particular idea in mind. So Giri continues with his plan of a3 and b4. He wants to try and open up lines on the queen side. And here Ding played c6. Now that looks, to my eyes, quite an ugly move because these squares are weaker now. I mean, not that one can exploit that immediately, but it looks a bit iffy to me. There are other ways to play this. One could play queen e6, bishop e7. But Giri praised this move, c6. He thought it was a very nice option. And in fact, things do work out very well for Ding. Here's the idea. Bishop c7 attacks the knight and opens up the d file. So there's just a little bit of pressure on d3. Giri played knight b3. I think I prefer knight c4, which does give white the option to come back to e3. But knight b3 played. The knight comes back to d7 to cover the c5 pawn. h3. And Ding puts the bishop back on h5, which is certainly reasonable. One could also consider bishop e6 and maybe g5, g4. Now that this pawn has come to h3, that gives black something to bite on. You can just imagine that g-pawn flying up the board. But bishop h5, also a very good move. That pin is annoying. And here, Ding, well, he really went for it. He played f5. So he's trying to exploit that pin, just putting more and more pressure on Giri's position. So that, well, if pawn takes pawn, c4 and e4, you can see that's already big trouble for white. So after f5, Giri took on c5. So this is really ambitious play by the Chinese player. He's given up a pawn, but he just wants to get very quick pressure on the light squares here. And at the moment, his king position is pretty solid as well. He's got his bishop here to protect those squares. The pawns are preventing any breakthrough. The queen hits the knight, so rook b1, so it's a nice tempo. And here is where Ding really went for it. He played g5, and, well, this is a clear attempt just to rip open white's position. In fact, he could have played pawn takes pawn and then simply taken the bishop and rook f8 and gone in for an endgame. And that is not easy for white. White's certainly a little bit worse there. If we come back, Giri said he intended playing queen takes and hoped to hold this endgame. Not a beautiful position, but, well, white has chances to hang on. Those pawns aren't great. You know, after this, you can see there's going to be pressure here. But instead of taking on f3, bishop g6 is an interesting idea. Just increasing the pressure on d3. That bishop is a very strong piece. And white is under a lot of pressure. There's also moves like knight d5, looking at c3, looking at f4. That's not an easy position. So Ding missed a good chance there with pawn takes pawn. He played g5. As I said, it's an attempt to just blow white away. But he had overlooked something. After pawn takes pawn, g4. He could still play queen takes, and that's still quite interesting for black. But g4, he didn't want to go for some endgame. He wanted checkmate, but he overlooked that after knight g5, queen takes pawn, h4 just about holds things together for white. Well, it does hold things together for white. That gives Giri security on the king side. So you can see that e4 square is now under white's control. And, well, the g-file certainly isn't opening up. So Ding sank into thought at this moment. He thought for 27 minutes. That a clear indication that things have gone badly wrong. Cheers. And he played b6. Now if bishop e3, then black is still battling here. You know, that knight maneuver is once again quite irritating. But here is where Giri had a moment of inspiration. He thought for just over 4 minutes, and he simply played the knight back to e4, allowing the bishop to be taken. And this just gives his position more stability. It's less easy for black to get counterplay now. Now, the best looks like g3. So, obviously that attacked the queen. The queen moves to the side, so it's still not possible to take because there's something nasty will happen down here. And, well, white is a pawn up here. Clear pawn up, but it's still not absolutely cut and dried because white's king is a little bit exposed. Maybe bishop e7 here. Bishop d6 also possible. I think white has a pleasant position, but it is definitely not over. But Ding running short of time, well, he's suffering. Things have gone wrong for him, and somehow I think he's having a crisis of confidence at the moment. He obviously just thought his position had gone downhill really badly and just thought, oh, whatever, I'll take the piece. I think if he were in better form, he would not have taken this because this is absolutely crushing for white. The b file opens and white is able to transfer pieces, well, notably the queen, to the danger zone around black's king very easily. So there are a couple of things. Queen b2 sometimes is just a good move, but also there's this move d4, and that allows the queen in. That is the crucial point. If the queen can enter the attack, it is game over. So watch what happened. Knight f6. So that potentially gives the king an escape route. But then came knight d6. I suspect this is the move that Ding had underestimated. Obviously, because it's check and the queen is attacked, it's a fork, that has to be eliminated. So that clears a very important defensive piece, that bishop. And now here's the move, d4, allowing the queen to enter the game. And that is absolutely devastating. So even though white is a piece down, well, he's got 3 huge pieces about to fly into the attack. And you have to look at black's pieces over here. They can't help with the defense at all. The queen isn't quite in Siberia, but it's far enough away that it can't really help with the defense. For example, if the king tries to run, then queen takes pawn. And, well, here's the trick. If the queen comes back to defend, you can see that that pawn is hanging, and well, it's possible just to do this and go into an endgame with well, a material advantage, at least a pawn up, basically. Looks like 2 pawns. Yeah, so it must be winning. But Ding just collapsed completely. So instead of putting up maximum resistance, well, he was on tilt, basically. C5. The rook now covers the a6 pawn, but this makes things even worse. Knight takes pawn. There's a couple of threats, but notably queen b2 is going to threaten instant devastation. Rook e8 played. I mean, queen b2 is probably quite good, but queen c4 is even better. And that was the final move of the game. Ding Liren resigned here. So let's have a look. There's discovered check threatened. Let's see what's possible. If king d8, there's knight b7 check. You pick up the rook, and then the rook and queen will decide. If rook c6, then we can push the rook. Queen takes, and now the queen comes in. If there's a block, then rook b8 is coming, so king c8, knight a6. This is not pleasant for black. Check, and rook takes rook. Utter devastation. So I repeat, that is the final position. Ding Liren resigned, which meant that Giri is just a half a point behind Nepomniachtchi going into the next round. So leading scores: Jan Nepomniachtchi 7 out of 11, Anish Giri 6.5, Fabiano Caruana 6 out of 11. Now, I'm recording this with one game still going, and that's Grishuk against Vachier Legrave, and it looks as though Vachier Legrave is going to lose that game. So Maxime falling well behind, looks like he is going to be out of it. So it's really down to 3 players. Pairings in the next round, of course, absolutely crucial. We have Caruana plays Giri, that's huge, and Wang plays Nepomniachtchi. Still 3 games to go. As Nepo said, it's like every game is a cup final from now on. Don't miss the action. Round 12 tomorrow, Saturday.